Alright guys, Mack again today. Hope you're all doing well and enjoying your day so far. The loudness equalization cheating drama of the last couple of months is coming back in force today, with Dashy and Cellium suggesting that one team back in the Cold War days a couple of years ago now knew about this back then and used it the entire season long to get a great search and destroy record and even use it at the World Championship. Which team is Dashy referring to? We'll dive into all the evidence over the coming minutes. Very much enjoy your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I'd greatly appreciate it. Plenty to discuss. Firstly, just wanted to look at the standings here. So the current Major 4 qualifier standings are as follows. OpTic, of course, number 1 at 30 points. Thieves at 30 points, but they played their 4 games. OpTic play LA, Guerrillas, and Boston, I believe, this upcoming week. Rokkr, FaZe, the usual suspects. And as usual, you've got Ravens, Guerrillas, Mutineers down here. Legion at 2-1. They've had a relatively easy schedule so far. Should probably be 3-0 if they'd have beaten London. Toronto, of course, 1-3. Pretty interesting. The overall season, though, is rather more interesting. And there are some questions about this again. How competitive this league is, whether the format should be changed to make the season more interesting, because last year the race for champs was fantastic. We had the subletters making their way through. They made it in the end. There was LA Guerrillas, there was Minnesota Rokkr, but in fairness, this season I think it's the top of the table where things are rather more interesting. FaZe, Ultra, and OpTic all have a 65% series win rate with 20 wins and 11 series losses. Of course, the points vary based on placings at events and stuff, but still that's a pretty remarkable set of numbers. And these are the overall kind of statistics for the league. The competition at the top I think is great. It's a bit of a shame in a way that we've got teams like Legion and Ravens and Mutineers and, you know, Guerrillas. They had the money, they don't have it anymore, but they just didn't have the decision making. But Mutineers and Ravens and Legion, they've always been in this boat over the last several years, not paid much money, not built particularly good teams, and it just doesn't make the league so competitive from top to bottom, whereas it's always the usual suspects here in the bottom 4 in the season, basically every single year. Thankfully, on the upper end, we've got new teams like Boston coming in, they're giving it a good go. Subliners obviously won an event this year, Surge is 7th, but we know they've got potential on their day to beat anyone. So I do think the competition of the league in the top 7-8 teams is very good indeed, and lots can happen in every individual weekend. But there were some questions, right? What should be done about the fact that it's the same teams at the bottom? Do you allow every team to go to champs anyway to make it so that those teams have more to do at the end of the season? Because right now Ravens, like, their champs prospects are short. What are they really playing for here apart from KDs to maintain their spot in the league next season? Or of course they can go to Major 4, Major 5, try and make something happen, but it's going to be challenging if they're starting in the losers bracket. I still like the 8-team champs personally. The ideal world is that you know, the CDL is actually a profitable enterprise for these teams, so these lower tier teams actually have more money to put into things rather than just going the poverty route, which unfortunately have done. But you know, Legion is still making things interesting, thankfully, for the season. I just wanted to look at that because it's a consistent trend at this point, and last year was the only real year so far where we had a great battle for the World Championship. This year we still might between just 2 teams, but every year at about this point there's a fair few games between when Guerrillas, Mutineers and Ravens play anyone that don't really feel particularly impactful because, you know, they're already out of things really. So there's some questions about that. Also from aBeZy, I thought was a really interesting piece of analysis that I know that some people have been mentioning, that if Rokkr were to make the World Championship this year over Vegas by something like 10 points, that would come back to the OpTic versus Rokkr match right at the start of the season that OpTic forfeited, right, because of the SAE drama. So if that happens, I mean, it's going to be remarkable. But Vegas will need to get the job done quicker than that, and they might not be required to if Rokkr fall off massively. But the thing is for Vegas, right, their stage 5 record or their stage 5 schedule is tough. So for stage 4, they play Toronto and Florida to close out the stage. Vegas should at least beat Florida, and that should guarantee them winners bracket progression. But Vegas's stage 5 games, they play OpTic, New York, FaZe, Minnesota, Seattle. Like, that is tough. Firstly, that Seattle game is, or that Minnesota game is going to be massive, but even going 2-3 there is going to be quite the challenge. Whereas the Minnesota Rokkr, they play FaZe and Thieves to close out this stage, and the next stage they play London, Boston, Vegas, LA, Thieves, Toronto. So that's also not super easy, but it might be slightly more achievable. So difficult to say, but Legion really need to capitalize on this specific stage, because next time I'm not sure if they're going to be making winners there at Major 5, which could open the door to Rokkr again. So just wanted to look at that going forwards. WJB79 did a great job putting this together over on the Reddit. As we dive into some of the drama around the OpTic camp, I also wanted to mention this. I thought was pretty crazy to look back on, that this series that they almost lost here, they were down 173 to 80 on Mercado hardpoint, down 2-1 in the series, and even the setup here that London have should be good enough to hold. London choked this map away, they lose the game 5, and since then, or including this series, OpTic 18-1 in series, 26-12 map counts. And I know that after this tournament, right, I think even Method said that he wonders whether if they'd have lost this map and gone up top 12 at their home major, whether they would have actually stuck it out. I don't know what they would have done. If they'd have come top 12, would they have made a move? Because top 12 of the home major after not looking so good online would have been devastating for OpTic. And I just wonder if they'd have swapped out Ghosty for somebody else after this and decided that it didn't work. At the same time though, their scrims already were going quite well, so there's probably a decent chance they stuck together, and I'm not really sure what their alternatives would have been. But depending on how well this OpTic team do in the future, this might we might look back on this moment as kind of like a Karma versus Fastballer 1v1 moment that really changed the trajectory of the OpTic landscape. Because when Karma won that 1v1 against Fastballer, it was stated after the fact that if he had lost that, they would have blown it up. We don't know so much about this situation, but it's definitely an interesting what-if type moment. So Ghosty's been a key part of their turnaround, but Ghosty and Dashy have given their thoughts over the last few days to the loudness equalization cheese. We know that the online Call of Duty aspect of this game isn't particularly good, largely because people have discovered in the last 12 months or so there's this setting in Windows. You have to go through a few fiddly things to find it, but it's called loudness equalization, and when you turn it on, it really boosts the low sounds, so you can hear footsteps really loud, as even if they've got dead silent, you can still hear them, and you can just hear everything all across the map all the time. So this was discovered and talked about pretty much at the start of this year's life cycle, but knowing pro players, some people have probably known about this for some time longer than that. And that's the discussion here from Ghosty and from Dashy and from Cellium, that even back in Cold War, we're talking the 2021 season, some teams were using this to their advantage. Dashy says that there was a certain team that was using this at the World Championship. Dashy also found out about it. He decided not to use it because it was kind of different to what he was personally using, but rumors were going around that someone was discovering this at the time. Now, I know that even in the Modern Warfare days, people wondered when Owakening joined the scene in Florida, how his awareness was 99 straight off the bat. Some people have now looked back on that and said, could it have been the loudness equalization? I would say it's more likely to be the start glitch that Florida was supposedly using. It was a glitch in Modern Warfare. When you died, you could press the start button, and when the kill cam played, it would show you the big mini-map you get when you bring up the start button, but from the kill cam player's perspective, so you would get free info on the enemy team. That's more likely the case. This, I think, is another team other than Florida, and clearly a very good search and destroy team at that.
No, listen, in Cold War, right, everyone had the assumption that Daddy worked, right? And it did, yeah. But if you turned on loudness, that does not work. I've turned it on like in off-season chows. Like,
wait, think people use it in Elite?
100%. 100%. I'm not gonna say like a lot of people, but people who like came from S&D circles or like played S&D 8s and like that, 100% were using it in Cold War. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if you looked at like all the team's S&D records, right? Like of the full year, like whoever the number 1, 2, and 3 team are, like excluding FaZe, because there's no way they knew about it. They probably had it.
NDQ is crazy, bro.
It's crazy people knew about it like even last year too. That's crazy. I didn't know about it last year until freaking.
No. People were using it in Cold War. You know, teams were using it in Cold War.
Yeah, I heard about that too.
Because at champs, I don't even know if I want to say the team that was using it, but like, there's a team using it, and then like Ender told me about it. He was like, yeah, they were using it the whole time.
Yeah, he's probably breaking down, right?
I literally put on a Cold War champ. Yeah, literally. I swear to God, I literally.
Wait, in the chat, type it. Who was it?
It's dude, like it's exactly who you think it is too. Like
that team?
No. It was I typed it. Did you see it?
Oh, that team.
Yeah, because Ender was saying that, and then he was saying Porter put on their setups apparently.
I bet this time I don't get to.
Nah, but bro, I'm telling that they were. So I literally used it at Cold War champs, because I'm like, bro, I was trying to tell my team like, bro, trust, you guys have been sound like. And then they were like, no, I think you're turd, bro. So then I tried it in a scrim. I was like, it's kind of godlike, but I didn't want to like use it at champs and tweak. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I just found out about it like the day of.
Yeah, makes sense.
I was like, I'll just play with my normal.
That's crazy.
Makes sense though why they played S&D like that.
So I think what Dashy said towards the end of that clip there was quite telling, right? Where he says, no wonder they played Search and Destroy like that, or something to that effect, right? He was like, yeah, no surprise they played Search and Destroy like that. It makes sense they played S&D like that, given the, if they were using this and had turned it on. So Dashy said that this team was using it. And what team could this potentially be? Clearly, it's a good Search and Destroy team, and a Search and Destroy team with a specific style. Now, this really narrows it down to, in my opinion, one team back in the 2021 days, and that would be the Toronto Ultra. Maybe Dashy's information information is not exactly entirely accurate. It's tough to say based on pure speculation, but that's the way I read into it. Into your thoughts in the comments below. And we know that even back in January and very recently, Scrappy has been vocal against the loudness equalization cheese, but I believe we know that even Standy was using it on his team when he was on the team at the time. And okay, Scrappy I believe doesn't use it, but or at least didn't use it at the time, but his teammates kind of did, because a lot of teams are using it nowadays, especially online, because if you don't use it, you're at a significant disadvantage in Search and Destroy, even though it's banned on LAN. But of course, it's banned on LAN now, and they disable it now. But back in Cold War, back in even last year in Vanguard, teams it wasn't known about. I imagine the referees weren't checking for it and disabling it actively on the PCs on LAN. So, you know, players could have used this back in the day, not just in their online games, but also in a LAN environment as well, especially crucial, of course, in Search and Destroy. So this takes us back to the Cold War season, where these were the 2021 season standings. FaZe, of course, a massive positive outlier this year. They were unbelievably good, and we're pretty sure that FaZe weren't using it that year. I believe that aBeZy and others said they only found out about it at the beginning of this title, or the beginning of, you know, somewhere during Vanguard they found out about it. I don't believe that FaZe were using it. You then get to, what were the other good Search and Destroy teams? There's only really two on here. One was the Minnesota Rokkr. They were very good at Search, especially in their game 5s, but terrible in the respawns. And then, of course, Toronto Ultra, the other great S&D team. These were the individual numbers, actually, from that season, and this is just looking at those three teams. Look at the S&D KDs along here. Insight, a 1.24 for the season. Cammy, a 1.14 for the season. Two Toronto players at the top of the list. Then you had CleanX at a 1.04, Bance at a 0.9. And the reason why I think that Dashy is likely to be referring to Toronto here is just because they had a specific Search and Destroy style. If you guys remember Cold War, especially Moscow Search and Destroy, they were quite famous, really. They would go mid-map, they would fake it over towards B, they'd go back to A, and then sometimes they'd finish at B, sometimes they'd finish at A. And they were really difficult to read, and they seemed to get it right every time. It was almost remarkable how consistently, and maybe this was just good reads from the Toronto guys, but looking back, it is quite interesting, right, that they would almost always seem to get mid-map control, get some presence A, some presence B, they would read the way the enemy team was rotating, and then they would turn up to the site with no defense to get the bomb down with about 20 seconds to go. They did that a lot of times very successfully on that map mode combination. You look back and you think, damn, maybe the reason why they were able to read the rotation so well was because they were just hearing absolutely everything, and they could rotate to the site where they heard people rotating away from. So very interesting stuff. And I mean, look, Toronto, they made the grand finals in the World Championship that year, and we don't know, based on this evidence, whether Toronto could have been using this on LAN. You know, if they weren't checking for it, nobody knew about it at the time, then I guess they could have done, right? They, of course, beat Dallas Empire in that crazy series where Dallas clutched up Game 4 hardpoint on the raid, and then Game 5, though, Toronto won, it got to the grand finals. And I mean, their Search and Destroy was unbelievable all season long, and as I say, they did have a specific style. So what does this mean looking back on it, right? I do wonder if this is, maybe not to the same extent, but when the CSGO cheating drama happens, like with the coach bug, if you guys are familiar with that story, coaches knew about this, they found out about this bug where they could basically put themselves as an invisible camera in the sky so they would get free information, and coaches found out about this and just didn't really tell anyone because they were like, well, this is kind of cheating, but we know, nobody else knows, so I guess we should take advantage of it. Turns out a lot of people started to figure out and realize this, and all of them were doing it behind the scenes, and it was a massive scandal as a result. So I wonder if Toronto, like, if they did find out about this early and were using it even a couple of years ago, they could have said something. They could have said, hey, this is probably a bit too good and maybe should be banned, as it presently is, at least in a LAN setting. But you know, it's a question whether it's considered cheating, but if they knew about it and nobody else did, they must have known they were getting a competitive advantage at the time if that team is indeed at play. And it does make you look back at those results with some questions as to how valid those seasons were, especially when a lot of it was done online anyway, because the pandemic had struck, and therefore there was a lot of online games where this type of advantage would be very strong. So definitely intrigued to your thoughts in the comment section, but I thought a really interesting story that you know, might well not go away going forwards, and also makes you wonder whether there's potentially another glitch or setting or something arising that the pro players found out about because they play the game 8 hours a day, mostly every single day, that the rest of us don't know about yet, and we might find out in 2 years' time that a certain team was using online in this current version of the game. That's why ideally a LAN setting is superior. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.